There we are again. Welcome back and welcome to the table, Sara, Kemppainen, Jorick, Beijer, and Mayor Verkerk. Welcome. We also have as a guest Marcus Andersson, founder and CEO of Future Place Leadership, a Nordic consulting company, consulting cities and corporates in placemaking, in talent attraction and foreign direct investment. It was really unfortunate because Marcus would have been here to be the co-host of this talk show, but unfortunately, with us going into the red and Sweden still being yellow, you had to cancel your ticket, which we understand, and we are very happy that you're here. Live from Stockholm. Marcus, please tell us what is the impact of COVID on placemaking, and maybe also tell us all the secrets, what is needed to build places for good. Marcus.
Thank you very much, Nicole. So I'm Marcus, live from Stockholm. It's really a shame that I can't be with you in The Hague. It would have been fantastic to join you in the studio. So let's make the most of it digitally and remotely and see what we can do with that. So I represent Future Place Leadership. We work with places. We try to create more attractive, better places for talent, for investors, for visitors, for residents. I'd like to take my point of departure in 5 topical trends that are impacting places and cities at the moment. And several of these have been either exacerbated or at least influenced by the pandemic. We can go to the next slide, please. And even the next slide after that. So there's a lot of talk about the death of the high street. Sorry, one slide back. There's a lot of talk about the death of the high street. So you all know that high street retailers, they are in hard competition from large supermarkets, from online shopping. And this is something that has been heavily accelerated by the current pandemic. So we kind of need to reimagine how we use our city centers and what we use our city centers for. We need to think less shopping, we need to think more culture, more experiences, more temporary use and flexible use of public space. For example, pop-up events, both indoors and outside. It's one way of doing that. Next slide, please. We see a clear trend that many people will want to continue work remotely even after the pandemic ends, meaning that many companies will have empty or vacant office space, and they need to downsize their office space. So the interesting question here is what to do with all this empty, vacant office space. And again, I think we need to think flexible use of this space. And I know that Jorick, who will be speaking later, he will introduce some innovative measures in this regard, what to do with these types of offices. Next slide, please. And more people have not only realized that it's possible now to work remotely, a lot of people have been frightened by urban congestion. And I think this presents a historic chance for second-tier cities and smaller cities to attract new residents and talents. And Richard Florida, whose quote you can see there, he predicts that smaller cities and suburbs would really be could be the winners in this race. And I think it's even likely that rural places will be able to attract more residents. And I think we also have a historic chance to kind of combat or overcome over-tourism that has plagued cities like Amsterdam, cities like Barcelona, and Venice the last few years. Next slide, please. We also see new patterns of mobility in cities, like bicycling, for example. More people than ever want to bicycle in a city like Paris. So we have a historic chance now to become less car dependent and more bicycling friendly, for example, in many cities all over the world. And I think Dutch cities, you're kind of leading the pack here. And I think that's something you should use in your marketing to attract talent. Next slide, please. And finally, talking about trends and crises, the biggest of them all, the climate emergency. And I think everything we do when it comes to restarting our cities need also to help solve the climate emergency going forward. Next slide, please.
This one?
So a very interesting question now to ask is how can we find common ground between cities and corporations and in reimagining places and cities? Next slide, please. And I think one very good starting point and one of the best bets we have is to kind of rally around and find common ground in the sustainable development goals. This is familiar territory both for corporations and cities. Next slide, please. And if we look at the pillars of place attractiveness, we can kind of try to break down what solutions could look like. If we look at tourism and visitors to begin with, I think that if we look at the value chain of tourism and experience, the tourism and experience industry, both cities and corporations need to work together to create better conditions for sustainable tourism, for responsible tourism, including business tourism. And I think the pandemic has shown that you can now do conferences and events in a hybrid manner or a digital manner. You don't need to travel all the time. That's one area. Secondly, when it comes to investment promotion and investors, I think investors and cities need to work together in promoting sustainable investments in line with the SDGs. And as Future Place Leadership, we are now trying to develop a framework for optimizing investment promotion in light of the SDGs or how they contribute to the SDGs. Talent attraction. Talents will increasingly, I think, choose places that they find sustainable, responsible, now even healthy perhaps, and they will want to be able to work remotely too at the same time. So I think cities and employers need to work together in creating a unified offer to talents that includes livability, that includes sustainable jobs, and that includes flexible working arrangements. And finally, our current residents in the city, they will want to see experiences that go beyond shopping in the city centers. So we need to think more culture, we need to think more experiences and sustainable mobility, for example, like bicycling that I've talked about. Next slide, please. So how to do all this? Well, I think place leadership is kind of the key here, the missing link. We need place leaders that are able to kind of bridge different interests. They're able to forge collaboration. They're able to lead in horizontal networks, if you like. This is very different from traditional hierarchical leadership inside an organization. And I would say that it's much more difficult. So we need to find these place leaders who have these skills or develop those skills. And who can be a place leader? I think a place leader could be someone from a community organization or a civic entrepreneur. It could be a mayor, it could be a civil servant, it could be a corporate executive. It doesn't really matter where they come from, as long as they are ready to kind of have the right mindset and develop the right skills for being a place leader. So, final slide, please. To sum up, I think we have a historic chance to restart, repurpose, reimagine our places and cities. And I think we can use the SDGs as a common ground and kind of rally around these because it's familiar territory for both corporations and cities who try to promote these goals. And I think place leadership will be absolutely critical in doing that, in forging this collaboration between cities and corporations. On that note, I just would like to mention a handbook for those of you who are interested in learning more about placemaking and place leadership. It looks like this, and you can find it on our website, futureplaceleadership.com. And that's all from me for now.
Thanks, Marcus. And I like the historic moment. And I also think it would be great that the guests here today, both the employers and the other stakeholders, I think they qualify as place leaders. So we will see how far we can get with them. Thanks for now. Business and people are challenged, and I think the government is really present to stimulate and support towards this new steady state. Welcome, Mayor Verkerk, acting mayor now in Rijswijk and former mayor of the city of Delft for years. I think you're a very well-known public stakeholder for many in the region. Welcome to be here. It would be nice if I may ask your reaction of some of the things you heard from the employers in part one.
Yep.
And please share what you think the role should be of the local and regional government in building back better, transforming to these places for good that Marcus just explained?
Yeah. So let me start with the status we have. We're now all living, working, and investing in the West Holland region, which is one of the top regions in Europe, because we have economic diversity and we have global connections, and we're a global player, especially if we look to The Hague in peace, justice, and security, and Rotterdam as a climate-proof harbor and trading place. It's top of the world. So our concern is keep this and develop this. So the goal will be to do an intelligent reopening after COVID by going for a strategy of places of good. This means spatial planning. And this is, well, exactly the thing with its core business for communities and the region. So we're quite good at it. So we have to organize ourselves to give an answer and to lead a strategy. To get there, we need some steps. First and foremost, the mayors are fighting to cope with COVID. That's really 24 hours
Super busy.
to do. So this means reducing contamination and master the virus, also by influencing the public space, making rules for meetings and engagements, which are very hard on the people, very difficult to do. So this is all about social distancing, reducing meets. Listen to the speech of the Prime Minister tomorrow at 7 o'clock. We will get more severe measures.
Yeah.
So this all influences the capabilities of people and the organizing power that we all have, which is really in a weak position. The new thing is that we work more at home. This is a boost to digitalization. Helps. Also for people to work on this basis, also on schools and students. We all learn this, so this is an economic boost. We also see less traffic on the roads.
Which is good.
Which is good. Second is to organize test facilities and vaccine production. What we learn is this is a new economic impulse to respond to this need, to this public need, and to this societal need. So we need more guaranteed scientific and vital production conditions. So don't be dependent on other countries for this vital.
Well, we have Janssen and
Products.
Janssen in Leiden. That
Yeah.
should be good.
Yeah, well, it makes us dependable. We don't like it. It's a boost for new economic and scientific development.
Yeah.
You can organize it here. We got top 3 European university combined together. Rotterdam Erasmus Technical University in Delft and the
Leiden.
University in Leiden.
Yeah.
If you add it up, it's top 5 in the world. It's about high time. They organize themselves stronger and do some PR on that. Third one is to keep the quality of life that we have up to date. So this means action for local authorities. Firstly, in the mobility sector, our motorways are okay. Public transport is bleeding lots of money because they can do no more than 50% of the capacity.
Yeah.
This will cost millions. In the meantime, with a program, we try to cut back the peak hours and the traffic rush by flattening the curve of the public using public transport. That's the result. Third one, Andersson said it also, if you look at mobility, there's more space for biking extension in all ways.
Opportunity.
Free zone biking paths and all the other stuff. We are working on that. And the fourth one I'd like to mention is air connections and travel possibilities. They're under high pressure. Obviously at Schiphol and Rotterdam The Hague Airport. This all has to do with the big debate on flying, holiday flying, not necessary flying, and what will it mean for the future of our airfields and our companies. This is also a big one.
Yeah.
Government is doing what they can, but I'm not quite sure if it's enough to survive the economic and social changes we're in.
Yeah, so we need
But
to
for us,
find...
it's essential to keep this
Yeah.
public air connections, but we have to work on that. Another factor to keeping quality of life is housing. Right now we have a shortage of 100,000 plus for the coming 10 years.
Yeah.
So we have to build, and we have to build in difficult conditions, also because of environmental restraints. This has all to do with the nitrogen factor we all have to live in.
Yeah.
So we have to organize our development possibilities in these regions. The key question is, who will organize this? Who will lead the process?
And what do you think? Who should be
Well,
the
it has to
orchestrator?
be done on good neighborship and good working together between the national state, the province, the cities, especially the city region, who has to play a very important role and take the lead. But it's not ready yet. The fourth step will be support economics, also by education. It's mainly a national thing, but on local level we can reskill unemployed. There will be massive unemployed coming months. We see it coming because of the bankruptcy and the closures of companies. There will be tens of thousands of people who work in sectors who are no longer economically valid. So we have to reskill them to construction workers, we have to build.
And the government will
ICT
help.
people, it's growing.
Yeah.
And then medic and care.
Absolutely.
That's also important sector. And then on the economic support programs, we have the Economic Board South Holland, presided by Jaap Smit, our King's Commissioner, and we have the Innovation Quarter, our triple helix. So this is all ready, organized, so we don't have to do that. They can immediately go to work in developing plans and getting the money from the National Innovation Fund, 20 billion euros. We call it the Wapke and Wiebe Fund. And they have very excellent advisors from the different sectors to keep the right direction. It's very important. So there's 20 billion waiting for our plans also. So this will be organized. Then, of course, we have the Green Deal in the European Union led by Frans Timmermans, who's looking at climate change and carbon dioxide reduction. Also, the province of South Holland is a player to get money and programs this side. And what can we do locally? Well, we can support startups and scale-ups. We do this in several places in the region. If you want to have a good example, go to Delft, but this goes for many things.
Yes, Delft.
Yeah. And then, of course, and also Andersson mentioned it, it's transforming industrial areas and transforming office building areas in a more mixed and more future-orientated developments. So you can make combinations of startups and living, some other organizations that are very important in the neighborhood. But this will be a big impulse for changing these areas. And we have these in the region. Everybody knows the Binkhorst.
Yeah.
For in Rijswijk, we have the Platspoel Polder, which are all a little bit outdated office buildings. So we're working with Rijswijk on that program as well.
Also in Sweet Lake City.
Yeah. And last but not least is that we as locals and regionals can do more about renewable energy, I thought last night. But I don't know what Ms. Van Loon will think of it.
Let's get back to it in a minute. I think this is the perfect A4 for the next year. Welcome on board. Just to go over, innovation is driven by people, as we all know. So access to talent is really a precondition for attracting and retaining companies in the region. A successful talent hub, I think, builds on truly understanding what people in our region want and are looking for. And therefore, and I've said it again, it's important that we talk with talent and not about them. So please welcome Sara from Finland. She's a project lead at ICP at the moment. But I think it's interesting. Tell us a little bit more about you and the journey you had during those past few months.
Hi, thanks for having me here, Nicole. So I guess you could call me what is the global talent. I'm originally from Finland, born and raised there. But when I was 16, I was selected to study in an international school in Italy. And since then, been super fortunate to live abroad, was recently in the Netherlands, and to travel more than 40 countries. I was actually really excited about this plan for this fall. I was meant to start my master's in Washington, D.C. and Johns Hopkins University, but also more on a personal level, I was meant to reunite with my American boyfriend of 4 years. But as COVID-19 hit, the entry to US became totally impossible, and I was forced to change my plans. So I think what a lot of young talent is facing is what to do now. Is it worth to start your studies remotely? Are things going to get better by next year? Is anyone hiring at the moment? All these questions were in my head, but I'm an optimist, so I opted for deferring for a year and decided that I'm going to embrace this year that is totally unexpected. And now working for the ICP, launched my own freelancer consulting firm, and I'm doing my first podcast series.
Yeah, so lucky me. Listening to the employers in part one, is there something you would respond to?
I think that's a good question, and I think kind of referring to what Herbert was saying, I think there's this idea among young talent that no one is hiring, and that the first ones in are also going to be the first ones out. So I'm glad that we kind of broke that misconception immediately.
Sara, for the audience, is an influencer, and she has a vast audience. And we set up a special project, which we called Alternative 2020. The unusual things that happened thanks to COVID. Maybe you can tell a little bit about the projects and some of your findings.
So ICP is really interested in know what drives talent. And this year, obviously, COVID-19 has been a huge force driving talent. So we were kind of curious to know how exactly. So we started this research, and I had the absolute pleasure to talk to many talents between the ages of 20 to 35 from all around the world. And I would like to share two of my main highlights or insights. First is that talent is taking time off, and not just to watch Netflix and chill, but to actually reflect and reevaluate their lives and priorities. And I personally found that very profound, that this generation that is all about, grind and hustle and really making their career path, we're now slowing down and pausing and reflecting and reevaluating where they want to be and what they want to do in the future. And I think that will inevitably affect the type of work they will be looking for. I think a lot of young people are looking for purpose, meaningful work. And I think companies need to repurpose themselves as agents for good instead of agents for profit. The second point that I like to make is regarding remote work. I know some of us are totally dreading the Zoom calls and missing our work environments, but actually international talent is kind of embracing this new mode of working because simply remote work gives you flexibility, and especially as an international talent, that is, you're no longer constrained by your physical location, maybe by time zones, as we mentioned, but not so much anymore. Right. And I think there's important implications for both companies and governments. So for companies, I think they should allow this to exist for employees in the future so that talent can remain in their home countries or be more flexible. And then for governments, I think there needs to be this new envisioning of immigration law, which allows talent to seamlessly move between different countries. So those would be my two takeaways.
That's clear. If you were to choose for a new employer now, which I don't hope, of course, but what's most important for you in addition to those things?
Yeah, so I think for me right now, it would be to whether I see a growth path in the company or not. That would be my highest priority. So I think in order to have kind of a growth path, you need a set mentorship program. And I think that's doable even during times of remote working. So maybe in an ideal company, for instance, maybe Shell or something, I would enter a company and they would have a designated mentor who would guide me through the first months, maybe check up every 2 weeks and see hey, Sara, how are you doing? What are you liking? What are you not? Whatever. Maybe they could have a virtual tour of the company by connecting me to their colleagues in the different departments. And for book lover like myself, I love to get a reading list from Marjan telling what relevant articles and podcasts I should listen. So I think really it comes down to human connection.
Yeah, the mentoring.
Yeah, the mentoring aspect.
Good. I will do that. Thanks so far. We'll come back to you. According to the latest KPMG Outlook, 69% of the participating companies, which were over 800, said they would be downsizing their real estate next year. Is this an opportunity or a threat? And for who exactly? Jorick Beijer, welcome, founder of Bloscity. You made it into your life mission to make cities bloom, right?
Yeah, it's very true.
How? How? Tell us.
Well, I think a lot has been said about the potential to mix the use of cities. And what we do, we are a strategic consultancy. We consult corporations, cities, and investors, and it's always around the mix. It's always about the hybridization of space.
Yeah.
How do you make places where people live, work, learn, play, and stay? And I think that is a disruption to how we used to think about cities, about architecture, about real estate, where we grew up in this sort of Siam modernistic belief of functional separation. We see the talent all across ages wants to have the immersive sort of experience.
Yeah.
I think that's a great opportunity, especially in these days now.
Tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, sure.
Show us the way.
I'll take it away.
Yeah.
The question really is, working from home, is that a place for good? And I think we've all been sort of doing this 6-7 months of working from home, and a lot of us commented already on it. And I think, of course, it accelerated for some companies quite old-fashioned beliefs around remote working, or it also, just by fact, it maintained business continuity. But I think the question really is, what does it do, for example, to our mental health? And we see a lot of research now popping up on mental health problems among young people.
Yeah.
Because it's different if you work from home, if you live in a lush suburb of The Hague, than you live in a 30 square meter apartment, where you're basically doing Zoom calls on your bed all day.
Yeah.
Another thing to think of in working from home is, and I really like how it was brought up before, like research already implicates now that you miss mentoring and you miss sort of learning soft skills in your workplace. And that is something that will play out in 10 years for people that maybe missed this sort of 1-2 years of informal learning around the coffee machine and get quite a narrow view on their job and the company they work for. And I think a third observation is around that same coffee machine is you miss serendipity. And this is what companies are facing already. I mean, serendipity, that you find what you're not what we're looking for, that happens in space. And that doesn't happen in virtual space.
Not planned.
And it's harder to pick up the phone and have a chat. And if you do it, I mean, it's still not as sort of spontaneous as you would have in the office, where you just bump into each other, even if you would bump in sort of safe 6 feet distance. So I think, for me, it's more of a question like, what is the future purpose of the office? It's definitely not a question if the office has a future, because I think it's very clear that it will stay. It will just has to change and transform in some ways, as Marcus also indicated. So to that report, less space demand in a way. Talent risk in that same report popped up from number 11 to number 1. And for me, these things relate. I see a clear relation between talent management, talent growth, and space demand. So that's implication of how much space has an impact on us. Definitely. And my background is in built environment and human behavior. I love thinking of how space influences or nudges innovation processes or just well-being for that sake. And I think it's a huge opportunity now to, of course, it's a matter of survival for some, but it's also an incredible opportunity to lever on that momentum now and rethink how the office looks like for a lot of companies. So just flipping through that, and this is what I mentioned before, I think the answer at a high level is that sort of boundary blurring almost, if you will, between universities, learning places, workplaces, and also the informality of play at work and placemaking, as Marcus mentioned. For me, there are, when you then speak of purpose, I think there are sort of 3 layers to that, which I would love to point out on that sort of asterisk of placemaking, investment, and talent. And one, I think makes a lot of, it's almost obvious, is that talent wellness. So how do we design workplaces or blended environments, if you will, where people really thrive and have the sort of the opportunity to really live their most capacity in a mental and also physical way. I think on one sort of higher level, if you look at your company building, your corporate real estate, I think the idea of the campus, I mean, your company or your office doesn't stop outside of your door, and you're part of a network, of an ecosystem, always.
Yeah.
So how do you repurpose the office to have faster innovation cycles? And Mayor Verkerk also mentioned already that also the stakeholders that you have around you and how hugely important these are. And I think lastly, and I really liked that has been brought up by you before, is purpose being a purpose. I think the opportunity for your corporate real estate to drive a wider purpose beyond your shareholder profit or just the regular things you do, I think it's something that is high on the list of talents.
Yeah.
And I think it also fits very much this time, and where every consumer expects something more from a brand than they did maybe 6 months ago. So just 3 quick examples to illustrate that. And it's always a pity with my work is very visual and graphic, but there's also something like confidentiality. So
just blur the brand.
yeah, it's more of, in that sense, more of a question almost. Like, how do you think of Nike, for example? We have been working with Nike now for a year, and they have their European headquarters on the outskirts of Amsterdam. And they're now opening up all their sports facilities, inside and outside, to the wider community in Hilversum. So how do you drive healthy behavior? How do you help make a community make sport a daily habit using your corporate facilities?
Yeah.
And what kind of serendipity could you expect from these kind of encounters?
Yeah,
I think that's hugely interesting. Another question, we're working on the global headquarters of Siemens Healthcare in Erlangen, southern Germany. And Siemens is famous for its MR, CT, super high-tech scanning software. But how can you, as a Siemens or an Abbott or a Philips, how can you give back to the community and open up your facilities for your neighbors to do a yearly checkup and get some advice on your lifestyle? And so how do you rethink your place, literally your place in society? And maybe a more local example, and we're all aware of banking and how that's changing. And when you look at a bank like Rabobank, who has all these pockets in every town, small town in the Netherlands, where they have less people working, but being a cooperative bank like they are, how can you repurpose maybe some of that space for a community co-working club or for a library even? So I think there's a lot of opportunity to rethink that, and I think it's not an excuse to say, well, I'm not Rabobank, Siemens or Nike. I think every place has a purpose. And I think that's the opportunity for this moment to really think, how do you turn your corporate real estate into a place for good, not just for yourself, but also impacting the wider society.
Yeah, great, super inspiring, I think. And I think, it's not only for the big corporations. Small ones can work together with the larger ones, and which is nice. If you have anything to ask from one other person at the table, please do. Do interrupt. I can start with a question if you like. Or well, I'm really curious. I think all of you have international experience. Did you see an example that you would qualify as best practice in building, transforming towards those places for good? Maybe Sara?
I think that's a great question. I think someone who is international, but also in an intercontinental relationship, one big thing that came out from this time is passports. It's about visas. What can you enter? So I think Estonia is a great example among, I think there's 10 other countries that are now opening their borders for remote workers. So maybe that is a place for good, because you're both attracting talent, but you're also allowing them to leave in a more easily and
It's a
way.
digital citizenship, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I think it's called Nomad Visa.
super innovative. Other great examples you saw elsewhere?
We can do it here and now.
Yeah.
We hope so, we hope so.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind commenting on also what Marcus said. I really recognize the place leadership, question, but also opportunity. We are, as a company, in the midst of energy transition, and that is one of these changes that really happen locally.
Yeah.
They don't happen. This doesn't happen globally. I mean, it's a global problem, but you really have action locally, and that means you need to reconnect. We used to be 40 years a company where you were a citizen of The Hague. I find back a lot of evidence of how Shell operated 40 years ago with local orchestras or sporting clubs, and we've all globalized that. Now you go back into the change of energy transition and how you try and do that locally, and you need to become a place leader again and reconnect. We had 2 years ago, we have appointed special teams for The Hague, for Rotterdam and Groningen, our main. And it's amazing what comes out of to what I said earlier about the skills that can be helpful on both sides. So we now have far more people doing practical work with our suppliers doing our maintenance for our offices. We normally would just contract it out, and now we say, no, what is the skill building? We have skill programs for reskilling people into energy transition skills. We are a big employer, let's let them work here. You reconnect again on a local level. So I really believe that that place leadership is a very good team. I do believe also what the mayor said, that the growth agenda that we now try and form can give a sort of first priorities for people to come together. What do we want to do and how to find each other? I do believe that can help make it concrete and start working together, but it also needs to be agile and flexible, because what I learned from the COVID crisis is that you might not want to have, a testing facility in The Hague or a vaccine production in Leiden. What you need is people to find each other, to combine the skills and do what's necessary for the next step. But you first need to connect these people. So back to that place leadership. How do you meet these people around what agenda? Yeah. And it's fun because you discover other skills of your organization, and people love to broaden that impact beyond what they do in their 8-hour day.
But I also think, and I also listen to Marcus very well, is it requires an opening up of the system. We're so used to come up with policies top down or from the structures that are there. And I think what Marcus is also saying, this requires really a bottom-up approach. And we always say we need this, but how to organize it.
And to be honest, we are in the midst as a company of that transition, not only because of energy transition, but also because of different times, social media. We realize more than ever that you can't have one global voice, one communication, one strategy. You need to make it really fit for purpose in the environment you work in. So we are trying to find, as a global company, more mandate for the local people and also for the individuals to say, I want to work on this, because this is also our future as a business. It's not just things we do on the side. This is our future value. Absolutely. But it's quite a change. But it's people get energized from it, I believe.
But it's super interesting. I mean, it's a change, I think, on both sides of the equation. When I work with these bigger brands, and then sort of you study the intersection between them and local governments, for example, you see also that there's a lot of relearning around these new relations between corporates and cities. And something that we maybe used to have here, like in the second gold age, in the 1850. But now you see the bigger companies, they can take a bigger role in urban planning even, or in just community development. And it's also sort of relearning that kind of social skill and these kind of new relationships. And what I like to your earlier point is, it's not always also about like who is paying for what even. It's more like who is taking the initiative and who is using a certain influence. And I think that is super interesting. And it comes back to personal leadership even. If you, as a leader in a bigger company, want to drive a certain agenda, I think that's very different from always looking at a city government or even a regional board to take that initiative. Because the speed and the influence through social media is just humongous and a great opportunity for these kind of processes.
Real collaboration driven by your personal purpose.
Yeah, but also on a more equal level.
Yeah. Good. I think, don't hope so, but I think we're going into a second lockdown as of tomorrow. Well, let's hope not. But based on the experience we have and the lessons learned from the first lockdown, what will you be doing different? Maybe as a person, Sara? Mr. Mayor?
Well, we have to bite the bullet. We have to get through this. But I hope that everybody really gets the sense now that we really have to do something about our behavior to really, well, kill the virus.
We're at a distance.
That's what people really have to understand.
Yeah.
So it's an urgent call for everybody to keep social distancing and everything that goes with it.
And be
then,
responsible.
well, we know we need 3 weeks to see if things will flatten.
Yeah.
In the meantime, it's very inspirational to think about the reopening. That's that's the light of today. There will be a reopening, and we're ready for it. Okay, make plans.
Visualize what you will
make
be
connections.
doing. Yeah.
Also for cities and regions, we got the people. We got it organized in our Triple Helix organization and with the economic board.
Yeah.
We got the spaces. We know the spaces. We know exactly which locations are suited for making this transformation.
Yeah.
Well, then we have to interest and organize this new style approach of companies who want to do this with all the aspects you mentioned also. So it's a matter of organizing. We got it all.
Well, we've organized the place leaders, so together we can do this.
Yeah, it's an urge to organize it.
Yeah. We've heard that.
Yeah, maybe I could hop on that. I agree. I think there has to be more greater role of your own personality, like your own responsibility. And I feel that one of the flaws at the moment is that there seems to be no sense of urgency. I feel like with the first lockdown there was more sense of urgency that something is happening. I feel like now we're kind of losing kind of the focus, and like we need to refocus. Like this is still a crisis, and we still have to be up for it, like you said. But I think also, like Jorick mentioned, mental health is a huge issue. I talked about the benefits of remote working, but there are also a lot of downsides to it. And I think everyone needs to prepare and find the routines that are going to improve your well-being, whether it's meditation or going for running or exercise or calling your mom every now and then. You know, like you have to find your own routine and to prioritize. And I think employers as well, like they need to find ways to help employees to stay healthy.
Yeah. Good. We could discuss for hours, come up with incredible ideas, but time is ticking, and I really want to go back also to Bruno, who has been listening to us all along. Bruno, we're very much interested in your observations and recommendations you may have for us to secure or even go up in the rankings.
Thank you, Nicole, and I must congratulate you for this event. Everything I heard was very interesting indeed. So let me not summarize, but indicate some points for action. I will preface that by saying that repeating rather, rankings are not an end in themselves. The goal is not to improve rankings, it's to do something with the ranking. The future is about younger generation. Younger generation, we've heard from Sara, is looking forward to opportunities to contribute, to build a better world. But it's very difficult to improve what you cannot measure. This is where these rankings and benchmarking come in. The elements around that can be summarized in terms of action. I will just give five signals for action, which we've heard from the panelists already, and how to organize these 5 elements of action. The first 3 are about talent. And the talent policy is 3 elements. It's grow talent, attract talent, and retain talent. To grow talent, priority attention will have to be given to face this massive unemployment wave that is coming, to upskilling and reskilling. And this is a job for the local political authorities with the local universities and the local employers. Point number 2, attract. Talent, especially higher level talent, is globally mobile. This mobility is being redefined by online activity. Yet, we want to attract talent physically, and their quality of life becomes a critical element. Quality of life includes, good air to breathe, but also good cultural environment, safety, access to services, education, etc. So all of that is part of a policy that is organized around mobility, the redefinition of mobility. Third, retain. How do you retain talent? How do you make them feel to grow roots in your city, in your region, in your country? This has to do with the citizen-centric approach. And we've heard many practical proposals this afternoon about how this can be done. In addition to these 3 elements about talent, grow, attract, and retain, I would add 2 that take a special meaning in the post-COVID context. The first one is about smart cities. Every city wants to become a smart city, or at least no city wants to become a dumb city. But very often, the definition of a smart city has been conditioned to the technological dimension. We have been led to believe that a smart city is first and foremost a high-tech city. This is not the case. Technology will not do it alone. If we don't have a citizen-centric approach to how we want to deploy and use technology, our cities are not going to be smart. They will just be high-tech cities with a lot of video surveillance and face recognition. This is not where we want, and calling citizens to participate in defining their own future is critically important. And the 5th one is about the increasingly important role that cities are going to take vis-a-vis global challenges. We've seen in countries that have stepped back from their commitments to fighting climate change, like the US, like Brazil, and a few others, that cities, local governments have stepped up to the plate. They have said, okay, maybe our federal governments will not do what they should do, but we shall do it at local level. And cooperation among cities in that area and in SDGs pursuit in generally will become increasingly important. So these are just 5 axes for action. I think they can be easily ordered around 3 principles: leadership, openness, and attention to young generation. Leadership is both about building trust and being able to energize people to work together, building an ecosystem that will allow them to give their best. The openness is about cooperation. It's about keeping cultural, intellectual borders open to acquire the input from all the people, from all the continents, all the cultures, all the ways of thinking the city and its future. And last but not least, coming back to my initial point, we want to build a better future, and the future is not for people like me. It is for younger generation. So let's involve them, let's engage them, let's give them a voice. And I think that everything I heard this afternoon tells me that something very positive is happening in your area.
Thank you, Bruno. This was, I think, very clear, and many cities listening in to this talk show, I think, will take those points home. To repeat, it's all about leadership, openness, and younger generations. And that's nice. Thank you so much for now. I will get back to you if I need your help again. To conclude, the aim of today has been to showcase an employer-led transition towards places for good. Places that contribute to society and the realization of the SDG goals. And I think we can conclude that all starts with people, whether we call them global talent, human capital, it starts with people. And I think the crisis made us all reflect, as Sara also said. about the things that are really relevant to us, whether it's family or friends, care for nature and animals, but most of all, good health. I'm confident that these values get translated more and more and more by corporations, cities, and countries. And that then we can attract and retain the talent that we need to stimulate innovation that will take us out of this crisis and change us into places for good. Intelligent reopening and recovery of our economies, I think, really depends on our ability to truly listen and collaborate with the others, other humans, even at a distance and in times of uncertainty. And I think if we do that, in the end, we might even end up high on rankings for places for good. And with that, I would like to thank all the speakers of today, Marcus and Bruno as well. And we hope to see you again soon. For now, have a nice day and enjoy. We will.